Joining me now is Troy Hayes, an art teacher from Centreville High School. Welcome.
Thank you.
I am so excited to have you on the show today because you have a very unique talent, and I want to get into this as quickly as possible because it's so interesting. Tell us what you do here.
I started doing these about 5 years ago. They're NFL portraits. I started out drawing small portraits with color pencil, and then I very quickly got into big, large, kind of in-your-face kind of portraits that are three-dimensional.
Mm-hmm. And they are how big?
They're 4 feet by 5 feet.
So nearly
4 feet wide, 5 feet tall.
Yeah.
And I actually add all kinds of materials onto them. It's not just a painting; it's an actual relief with three-dimensional pieces such as shoulder pads, jerseys, towels, chin straps.
Right.
Anything that I can throw in there to make it more original, I do. So.
And you shared with us a really interesting story about how you got started. Who inspired you?
I guess I can owe it to one of my colleagues I work with at Centreville High School, a lady by the name of Pam Young. My first year there, she used to come in and do architectural paintings, and she would take pictures from where she had traveled all around the world of buildings, architecture, and then she would come back and paint them. And she would actually put plaster in a cake icing bag and squirt the plaster onto the canvas, creating columns and sculptures and architecturals that were part of the building. And then she would paint over top of them. Mm-hmm. So I decided to add that into my NFL portraits. The very first one I did was a LeVar Arrington, mm-hmm. and I took just a can of plaster and a palette knife and created wrinkles with into the jersey, and that's the only thing that's actually popping out on that one. Mm-hmm. And then further along, I started collecting materials such as jerseys and gloves and pieces of football, mm-hmm. Mainly from the kids at school, the ones that played football at Centreville.
Right.
And I added those into my paintings. And then I went further and started getting shoulder pads and chin straps and towels, anything I could get that was authentic as far as material to put into the paintings so that they would pop even more out of the painting than before.
And then along the way, you caught the attention of some NFL players.
I did. The very first painting that I sold was at the Dulles Expo Center in Chantilly. I only had 2 paintings at the time. The very first one I did, and then a Jerome Bettis painting. And I was taking the painting up just to get it autographed. I didn't have any intention of selling it.
Really?
And when I was there, I met one of Jerome Bettis's agents, and he came over and looked at the painting, and he said, he told me that Jerome, normally a lot of athletes don't necessarily sign paintings, and Jerome doesn't usually sign artwork. Mm-hmm. But he goes, he's going to want to buy this when he sees it. And I didn't know at the time, but Jerome Bettis is somewhat of an art collector.
Oh.
And the next morning, I presented it to Jerome Bettis, and he bought it on the spot, and it was gone. And then from there, I just started doing these shows, and I had people ask me to come set up at the show, and the more paintings I had, the more commission pieces I had, and on from there. And that was about 6 years ago.
That's great. Tell us about this one.
This is a half and half Sean Taylor. This was actually the 3rd painting that I did this size. Mm-hmm. And I had the idea of putting college and professional team together in one painting. So I kind of, down the middle, shredded from his college jersey over into his NFL jersey. And as far as color combinations, there's tons of more color in there than you would actually see on a normal uniform.
Yeah.
So it creates a kind of a neat contrast between the two.
That is so neat. Now I need to ask you, how much do your paintings sell for?
I recently sold the last 4 or 5 for $7,500.
Yeah, that's terrific.
I started out selling them at $1,500, so I've kind of worked my way up.
Right.
And that's one of the hardest things to do, is to put a price on your artwork as an artist.
I can imagine.
So I didn't, everybody was telling me at the beginning, you got to sell these for 3 times what you're selling them for, and I just look at it as I got to start somewhere, and it's more satisfaction to me for these players and these guys of this caliber to have these artworks in their house rather than the money. I mean, it's nice, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, right.
But
you're a huge sports fan.
Right, I'm a huge football fan, a sports fan in general. So mostly football right now, but I've gotten into a little basketball and a little bit of hockey and boxing. And
now tell us, as you were inspired by a colleague, I would imagine that you're sharing your inspiration with your kids that you teach.
Right. I actually, a lot of these paintings, believe it or not, I've completed in the classroom where I work at Centreville High School. And my principal loves it. He brings people in from all over the county, and you know, one of the first things he does is bring them down to my room, and he's like, "Hey, where's your paintings at? We want to show them." And these are people in suits and ties. They're not just teachers or kids or anything.
Right.
The kids love it. They see me working on it. It inspires them to put more work into their projects as well.
Yeah. So what does the future hold? What do you see yourself doing?
I'd like to be, you know, known as one of the best sports artists around. You know, I recently now have 2 paintings down in Indianapolis at the National Art Museum of Sports, and my paintings are hanging. There's about 50 different pieces there, and my paintings are hanging with Leroy Neiman's.
Oh,
and
my
he's
goodness.
probably the most well-known sports artist in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of a nice feeling.
But you won't leave us, will you? You'll still teach art at Centreville?
I'll probably still teach.
All
yeah.
right, good, good. Thank you so much for being
Thank you.
here.